Alright, so we're taking off where we left off in the last screencast and just going to walk you through the steps to be able to create this into a layout that enables the floating that we set up. So we've got the structure of our HTML set up, and if you need a review of that, just go back and watch that last screencast that we've done. And then we've got a few lines of CSS that set our body styles, which is helpful to just set the basis for what our body is going to apply to our entire page. And now we're going to walk through, and if we take a look one last time at the setup, like we've got the main ID, the header, the nav, the section, the div with the float left and then the float right, we basically are going to go ahead and set up some of these. So we'll start out with main, and a lot of the times, just to set things up like in the beginning, you might actually like set up placeholders for everything you know you're going to use. So for instance, I've got my header, my nav. We'll do the clear fix at the end, so we'll come back to that. We've got the box that we've set up, and then we've got left, and then also we've got right. And then the last one is going to be footer. Okay, so usually you're going to go in order of, tags a lot of the times, but a lot of the times just the order of top to bottom, left to right is a good practice. If we start putting things like the footer at the very top of the page, it might actually cause the cascade of your style sheets to act up on you. So we're going to go through and just walk through some of the common styles that we might actually apply to a page, and just to start to get things together. So we may see it automatically change over there on the left side. So we do have, let's see, the main, we've got a width that we want to go ahead and set. And you may have just noticed that that changed my width here of my page. Or not my page, but my actual containing div. And then we've got a background color. So remember, this is a container, and so we can set a background color specifically inside of here so that it changes. So if we take a look, it now will basically show that background color different from our body's background color. And then we also have this blue line is more of like a brackets preview. I think if we refresh the page, it just goes ahead and breaks everything. So it's because I just haven't saved my file. So we'll go ahead and save. We'll refresh one last time. Okay. Some other code that we're going to go ahead and add. We're going to add a border, and we'll walk you through how borders work. So when you set a border, we're going to actually set a border that is 1 pixel, and that's just going to be the width of the border. It's going to be solid. So there's a lot of options like dashed and dotted borders. We're going to use solid in this case. We're also going to assign a color. Okay. Now when we assign a border, you will notice, let me just go ahead and refresh, a border is basically applied to all 4 sides. So if I want to be able to be more specific, I can basically go in and type in the left border, and then you may see it's kind of close to the edge, but it's only on the left side of that that main container. So again, I love to work efficiently, so now that I've got that one in place, I can just literally copy and paste and change this one to the right side and then this one to the bottom. Okay, and then the nice thing about that is that allows you to control the sides of the border, so you don't necessarily have to have one at the very top. Okay, and then the last thing is, you may notice that this is all left aligned. A lot of the times we have websites that are center aligned. It's a little hack that we have to do. It's one of those concepts that once you start coding, you'll recognize this concept. It's used pretty frequently. It's called margin 0 auto, and you probably just noticed it centered my web page. Okay, so the way that this works is the 0 is the top and bottom margin value. So like if I wanted to change this to like 50 pixels, like it would move it down. Okay, but in this case I want it to be 0. And then the auto is really the magic trick that makes it center. So auto basically means the left side and the right side are going to figure themselves out so that it centers itself. So that works really well with containing divs, and really most divs that you want to be able to center. That's an approach that you can try, and in most cases it will work. So we are going to move on to the header. Now the header is a little bit different. Obviously with a real website we might actually put in like images and navigations and all these other things inside of maybe a header. But in this case we're just going to create like a placeholder just for the sake of understanding how we can set up boxes for our layout and then fill them in later. So we're going to go ahead and assign colors, and I'm just randomly picking colors so you guys can pick your own color for this assignment. And then the last part is you may notice that it is only going to be as tall as the content that's inside of it. Okay, so if we're using a background image or a background color, this is one of the rare instances that we're going to use height. Okay, and so this height is basically going to be a number that you set, and you can, change it around. 150 is probably a little bit too much. And then we can go through and just change it as we need. I do want to use caution. You don't want to necessarily use a height property on everything, because sometimes it does mess things up, and sometimes it's viewed inconsistently in browsers when it's used incorrectly. So in this case it's more like for a placeholder, and that works perfectly for us. For the nav we're going to use something very similarly, sorry. So we're going to go ahead and just copy and paste, and we're going to change some things here. So we're going to change the color first of all. So let's just go ahead and I love the code hints that it gives me, and we'll just pick a color. And you guys could pick hexadecimal numbers instead if you wanted to. And then we'll just go ahead and assign a height to this area. Okay. From there, we're going to just basically start working on the actual layout side of things. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky. We've got box 1. And box 1, we're going to use similar values, and I'm going to offset the width just a little bit just so we can see the box. So we'll start out with background color again. We'll pick a different color. And then for the width, we're going to use 1195 pixels. Okay. And then margin 0 auto. Okay, let's take a look what we've got. So this is actually going to act as our container. So remember, these first 2 paragraphs are going to go over to the left in a box, and the next 2 are going to go over to the right. So this is acting literally as a container that holds things together for us, and we can mess around with the the positioning of things, and we will be applying a clear fix to that later. So we'll come back to that when we need it. So for the left side, we're going to basically add in a width. And remember, we've got set widths here. For now, just learning layouts, learning fixed levels of measurement are going to be helpful to just understand how to set a layout up. So for the width of this, we're going to just kind of cut it in half. So let's just go ahead and say 590 pixels. Okay, and then we're going to also, you might notice that things are starting to move around in my document. We're also going to go ahead and say float left. Now when we float things, it's really critical that you have a width, and you also have the float property assigned. If you don't, a lot of the times the float may not work if that width is not also assigned. We're also going to go ahead and give it a background color. I think it's really critical for us to see these boxes just in understanding this concept. So we'll just go ahead and pick out something that's just a little bit different. Let's pick out like a gray color. And you will start to notice as we float things, like things might move around, and these other images and not images, but text areas and boxes are going to start writing up. So when we explained floating and clearing online in our module, we did talk about how it affects the flow of your page. So we'll go ahead and move forward, and we're going to move forward to the right section. And we're actually going to copy and paste where we can, because we can actually speed up our workflow just a little bit. So in this case, we're going to actually change this one to float right, and then we'll change the color again. Let's just pick something totally different. Would help if I actually save. All right, so I was sitting there looking and saying, why isn't it showing? And you know, when we code it, things aren't perfect, and you know, everybody makes mistakes. And so as we code, we start to ask questions why things don't work. So I'm just going to go back to my HTML real quick and show you. Hopefully we can get this to work. That closing div was in the wrong place. You see where that goes? So I'm not quite sure how I made that mistake. And look, my div's starting to come back together. So it's super easy to have the incorrect order of things, and sometimes when you're building your layout, you'll start to notice. The other thing that I want you guys to notice is, do you notice that background color that was there, how it went away? So that is another consequence of floating and clearing that is super frustrating, and something that you just have to learn to move things around. So let's just go ahead and alter just one thing real quick. We're going to go ahead and reduce the size of these in just a second. Let's talk about the box model before we talk about how to fix with using our clear fix method that we're going to get into here shortly. As we start setting our layout, we may actually want to put in margins or padding. So for instance, we've got margin left, and then we'll just go ahead and put in padding. Actually, I can just use shorthand there. And notice what starts to happen. Like my website just instantly goes out of whack. And I just want to remind you guys, we have the box model that we have to worry about. So technically the width of this just changed by 25 extra for the margin. And then we also added another 40, so we actually double this side here. So that ends up being like 65 pixels more. So we'll just basically change the width of our divs to be maybe 500 just to equal them out. Okay, and that'll bring things back together. That also helps you see our clear fix problem. So you see how this you know, rides back up and it just acts up, and then this pushes this over. That's a huge problem that we've got to figure out how to fix. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to press pause, give you a moment to make sure you have everything set up, and then in the next screencast we'll talk about how we fix this problem and how we can actually move on and reuse clear fix as well as floating as needed.